Hello and welcome back to another episode of KSP POV, where we play Kerbal Space Program in first person. As you can probably tell from the name of the video that we are going to be working on contracts today. We have four main ones. I think they're all pretty interesting, a little bit different. We do a couple parts testing ones, and we even do some spaceflight ones. So we managed to take care of a contract that we've been holding on to for quite some time as well. So all in all, it's pretty good. It's nice to take a little bit of a break from big epic missions like landing on the Mun. We've done. Sometimes you got to do some mundane things, just keep the finances flowing. So we go ahead and grab some contracts, look through the rest of them, see if there's anything we want to do. This contract this craft that I'm going to be building, this little rover, is going to handle 3 contracts at once. The wheels need to be tested, this heat shield needs to be tested, and this decoupler needs to be tested, all in different areas. I also do a test for myself to test out this booster cam, aerodynamic cam, to see if I like it, and I don't. I'll just let you know that now. I don't like it. It faces too far upwards. It's angled, which is good for a booster, but for a rover, it's not ideal. So we're going into the mission control room. We've already tested the wheels, and then we just tested the decoupler. So now all that's left is to drive this thing down to the water and test this heat shield. I realize in hindsight I possibly could have used... Oh, well. This rover's stuck. I go ahead and I revert the flight because since we didn't even leave the launch pad, I feel that it's okay to just... The idea that a Kerbal just went out there, reattached the decoupler, and then just put it back in place. So I don't feel like we need to go through the whole process of recovering the vessel for that. So that's my reasoning for that. So we go ahead and test the 2 items again, and then this time we go the correct way off the launch pad. But what I was saying before the rover got busted was that we probably could have tested this at the Cove launch site, and that's a much easier route into the water. But I don't know if the testing the wheels at the launch pad would have counted at that launch pad or not. I didn't want to run this mission twice. And then the second reason, more importantly, is I forgot. So, so we are making the long track. I'm speeding up the footage quite a bit because it's quite a long way from the KSC launch pad to the water. And the problem is you pick up quite a bit of speed there, so towards the end I'm really having to monitor and hit on my brakes. I don't want to hit the water with such force that we just explode the vehicle, because then not only is that a waste of funds, but it's a waste of time as well. So we go ahead and run the test and complete the contract. So that's pretty easy money. Any kind of contracts where it's testing a part, if it's splashdown, if it's landed at Kerbal, or if it's in flight and it doesn't require any specific altitude or speed or anything like that, all easy money. Always grab those contracts. Yeah, especially if it's landed at Kerbal or at the launch pad, because you recover the 100% of the funds, so it doesn't cost you anything. Alright, so now let's go ahead and start making ourselves a new craft. This is another parts test to test the Weasley? Yeah, it's the Weasley jet engine. I probably really easily could have just dropped this onto the launch pad, hit test, and then be done with it. But in order to kind of preserve the first person aspect, I decided to throw a camera on there. It's not really angled greatly, but it's something. Because all I have to do is stage it, make sure that it works, and recover the vessel. So yeah, another little set of easy money. So here I spend 300 out of my 400 science on high-powered electricity. We don't end up using it in this episode, but it will be utilized very soon. So now we are taking a tourist contract and we are hiring a new pilot. So say hello to Arlie Kerman, everybody. She's going to be with us from this point on, and hopefully for a while. Hopefully we can keep her alive. So this contract is to take 2 tourists on a flyby of the mud. I do forget at one point, and I think that I just have to take them to low curve orbit because that's typically what I do with this craft. But the goal here is to do a flyby of the mud underneath 100 kilometers and then safely returned. So we are once again back in the Mach 1 command pod. The Alcor is great, I love it, but we don't need to use it for every mission. And while yes, it would have held 3 in a single command pod, I already have this craft built. It's meant to take 2 tourists and a pilot, so why redesign the whole ship if this works? And I actually really like the Mach 1 command pod. The lander can, not so much, but you know, it does the job that it needs to do. So I go ahead and wait a little bit until I get out of the atmosphere before making maneuver, because the apoapsis will drop, and sometimes flight computer doesn't calculate that correctly if you plot your maneuver too soon. Typically 40 kilometers and above is when I like to start plotting my maneuver, because if I start tilting over to the maneuver node anytime before that, there's too much aero forces on my craft, and it really slows me down. So that's why I always try to aim for about 40 kilometers before I start tilting over. So we let flight computer handle our burn on this one. Still trying to trust it, but there's always doubt. And the throttle limiter is turned up, so that's why it's taking quite a bit. But we need to limit the thrust, because at full power in the vacuum we can easily pull 8 Gs or more, and we don't want to do that to our tourists. 5 Gs, you know, is acceptable. It's not pleasant, but it's acceptable. But you don't want to push it. They pay good money for a good time. So we go ahead and switch to one of the tourist views and spin the craft around so they can see this glorious planet of theirs. We kill the engine, kill the lights, just get ourselves ready to orbit and kill some time. Because once again, at this point I thought it was just low Kerbal orbit that we needed to be into. So Arlie Kerman, being a new pilot, decided she wants to earn her stripes and decides to go on an EVA walk. Those who suffer from motion sickness may want to look away. Because I did not do EVAs as first person last time, I promised myself that I was going to do it this time. Even though the controls in the Through the Eyes of the Kerbal mod using RCS thrusters can be very difficult at times. So yeah, so getting a whole handle on the controls, because small movements make big impacts on your trajectory in this game, especially in first person. And I missed my target, bumped the ship, so that starts to spin a little bit. Arlie struggles to maintain control, trying to line up with one of the ladders to just grab a hold and stop spinning. The ship is starting to go away from her, so she has to act quickly to get back to it. Angle herself right, and then reach out and grab the bars. And bring her back inside for safety. So safe and sound aboard the Mach 1 capsule. Arlie Kerman smiles and laughs at the adventure she just had, because she's got some pretty high courage. So she enjoyed that. So we realized that it's actually the mud that we need to fly by instead of orbiting Kerbal. So we go ahead and plot that in. We have to get below 100 kilometers. I like to go pretty low, but we also, that threw us into a very unpleasant orbit coming back around Kerbal. So what we do is we decide to just adjust our inclination to the mud a little bit to get a better plane of entrance. Plan of attack? One of those. I'm not the best with the lingo. I try. Right. I like how much information comes up on the screen when you have something targeted. And yeah, when you have this kind of information with the time to the node, the delta V you need to burn, and the time that you need to burn, the relative velocity, relative inclination, you can do a lot of stuff from just this window alone. If you know how to do what you're doing. I will be attempting docking soon. I have not successfully done a docking in IVA mode, so that's going to be interesting. There's probably going to be a whole episode of simulations just to get it right, but we are going to need to make a space station soon, so docking is going to become an important aspect of our space program. So here I did speed up the footage quite a bit. It just happened to be a long burn. But it's nice to be precise on this. And these are 2 tourists, so we have to make sure we take care of them and bring them home. We can't leave them stranded in space, because we can't EVA them, so rescue missions will become quite a bit harder. So I'm not exactly sure why I turned my engine off. Maybe to save battery, but then I turned my lights on, so I don't know. So yeah, we're just coming in. And I decided to point retrograde to the target because we have our cameras pointed down, and therefore by pointing retrograde towards it, we get a nice view of it as we come in. And we come nicely into the Mun sphere of influence. But then we lose power. So I quickly try to shut off what I can. I don't want to shut off SAS, even though that does use electricity. So instead what I do is I just start to rotate myself. We only have 2 solar panels on here, so it makes sense that we could lose charge. So I just rotate myself until they point the right way and I can see that my charge is increasing. So once again, I start to time warp. And then I reach the Mun sphere of influence. I'm coming real close. It is Arlie's first time seeing the Mun, and she just couldn't help herself. She just had to go on EVA again. So once again, those with motion sickness, you might want to look away. So having a little bit better control, she backs herself out. She just tries to keep herself aligned with the capsule as much as possible as she gets a first-hand view of the Mun for the very first time. And once again, safely boards. She's becoming a pro at this. So now all they gotta do is pass on by, exit the sphere of influence, and make their capture burn back at Kerbal to come on home. So far looking like a very successful mission. Arle hasn't checked with the tourists, but I'm sure that they're quite happy. I'm pretty sure that seeing their pilot exit the craft twice and tumble around in space was probably not the most comforting feeling, but once she got back on board, I think everyone was pretty happy. I was very anxious in that first scene, that first EVA, when she goes tumbling through space. I thought I was going to, end up stranding some Kerbals in space and letting 2 tourists die, which would be terrible for our reputation. So now we're just in orbit of Kerbal, and we just need to make our burn at the periapsis to bring our apoapsis down. Our periapsis is at 60 kilometers, so we will be in the atmosphere while we do this. Or we will be approaching the atmosphere while we do this. But we go ahead and use off pretty much the last of our fuel. And we point ourselves retrograde, or radial out, so that way we can eject our lower stage without fear of it pushing us downward and adjusting our approach in any way. Go ahead and kick that off, and then we hit our descent stage action group. So if you've just been joining us, our descent stage is the retraction of our solar panels, the activation of our radiators, and the retraction of communications dishes, and the arming of our parachutes. So once we hit the descent button, we're basically just locked into our descent. All we can do is make sure that we did everything correctly in the planning stage, and hope that it all goes correctly. So that I just pointed at is our heat gauge. If it reaches the top, we will all die. So very important not to reach the top. But with this craft, as opposed to the Alcor, I am very confident in its heat withstanding ability. So we just made our first pass through the atmosphere, and we are now coming back out of it. And we're going to have to make another aerobraking maneuver. So I extend the solar panels again because it is safe. They're not going to break up. Just so that way we can maintain our electric charge as we, see, we're full on electric charge. Because we need that for our SAS. If we don't have SAS, we could tumble through the atmosphere. So just time warp again. And look at our food and oxygen levels. We're just doing great. Our periapsis is within the atmosphere, so we will be landing. It's just a matter of how many times we have to go around. But because of the aerobraking forces, even though we don't have an engine, we are guaranteed to come back down to the surface. Whether or not we come down safely, again, another story. So I'm time warping to 4 times speed, just to kind of speed things along. If I notice anything go awry, I will lower the time warp, or the physics warp. But once again, we just kind of skim through the atmosphere. It lowers our apoapsis, but not quite enough to bring us back in. So we're going to have to do another round of this. So this time, rather than doing the deploy action group, I just decided to extend just the radiators, or the solar panels, because that's all we really need. We don't need a communication dish. So once again, just bring myself all the way around. And this is the first time that I've done aerobraking in the series, so that's why I'm kind of showing, like, I'm leaving a lot of this unedited, just to kind of show how it's done and how it looks in IVA mode, the process that you go through. In the future, if I have multiple aerobrakes, I'll probably end up consolidating them, as we've been doing with a lot of this stuff. We show it a couple times to show how it's done, and if we do it in a different craft, then of course we want to show it again, because it's new stuff to look at. And that's the joy of the IVA mode, is there's all these different things to look at. And if you can understand Kerbal enough to know what you're looking at, I think it's quite enjoyable, and I hope that you do too. So now our apoapsis is about 100. So on this next pass, we should definitely make it. So we retract our solar panels in. We time warp, and we're going through the darkness, so it's not the best. It would have been better to see what was going on, but we're going to be covered in fire soon enough, so we'll be able to see that at least. So our apoapsis is lowering, and we finally break 100, and then we finally break the atmosphere. So we are coming home, everybody. And our temperature gauge is doing pretty well. It's not even halfway through. That was our ground proximity warning, just letting us know that we are now on a collision course with the planet. Yeah, look at that temperature gauge. That is doing perfectly. I don't even need to spin or anything. Just hold straight. And because we have a decent reaction wheel on this and enough electric charge, we are holding very straight. And that's why it's always good to have enough food and oxygen and water. If you're using TAC life support or any of the life support mods, it's always good to have more than you think you would need, because each one of these aerobrakes took time, not just to go through the atmosphere, but to circle on back, and we had a high apoapsis, so that meant it was going far, which is taking more time, which is again taking more resources. So if we had only planned for just enough to cover the mission, with the idea that we wouldn't be aerobraking, that we would just be entering in an ideal position, our Kerbals very well could have died on their way, on their second or third aerobrake, their second or third pass around the planet, simply because they just didn't have enough supplies. So it's always good to pack a little extra. And here we are. We made contact. I talked straight on through the landing. I apologize about that. But yeah, our chutes deployed perfectly, and we made it. We brought 2 tourists back. We got a bunch of reputation. We got a bunch of money from that. Everything is good. And so now I decide it's finally time to finish that freaking contract that gave us the lander can in the first place. We've just been holding on to it, not doing the contract, because the lander can is useful, and it's been helping us get to the Mun and back and bring scientists. But now that we have the Alcor pod, and we've been primarily using that as our lander command module, since it holds the 3 Kerbals, we don't need to hold on to this lander can. Except for the tourist traps, but at this point we'll probably end up redesigning that anyways, or unlocking the actual part, the science node that gives us the part. So here is just going to be the test object. It's not much, just some solar panels, battery, reaction wheel, camera for outer view, and command pod. Oh, and parachute, of course. And then so everything else is the lifter. This little tiny thing that I'm putting on here is going to be the nerve engine. That's not the nerve engine, but I need to test the nerve engine. There it is. So we go ahead and we just throw that on the side. It looks ugly, but it's just going to be jettisoned off after it's been tested. So yeah, it's not my favorite IVA mode. It's not my least favorite, but lander can. It just requires, because it has the window right in the middle, it requires you to constantly flip your head from left to right, which is not always the most pleasant. So there we go. We go ahead and test the nerve engine, and then we decouple it. So we are ready to go. And yeah, the screens are kind of awkwardly placed. But they're customizable like that. I enjoy that. I can see the surface speed. And we have liftoff. I do like that it gives you such a clear view out the craft. That is very nice. So we're going to jump ahead a little bit to when we're already making our gravity turn. And then to the point where the air forces starts causing thermal heating on our craft. So we're doing a high G. So we go ahead and bring the thrust down a little bit. And we have made 100 kilometers apoapsis. And we plot in maneuver node. Because all we need to do is get to orbit and then test the pod, and then that will complete the contract. We do, of course, have to bring the Kerbal home, but that's not specified. The company doesn't care whether or not that happens. They just want to know that the command capsule works, and they're probably pretty annoyed and feeling very impatient because it has been at least a year since I've taken that contract. So we've got a nice beefy engine. It's going to give us a lot of speed. It's going to put our G's to dangerous levels, but easily bring us to orbit. So that's nice. So we go ahead and roll the craft over so we can see the planet. And it's interesting to see the KSC and the Island Cove. And then we run the test. We complete the contract. And then we go ahead and descend and bring ourselves down to a cool 42 kilometers. We prepare ourselves for descent. It's a pretty textbook orbit, pretty textbook ascent, and the descent should be no other. I am landing in the dark side. I don't know why I did that. There's no reason. I could have gone around one more time and landed on the light side, but here we are. So I go ahead and pop in my apoapsis, periapsis, because it's interesting information, and then I'm going to go ahead and speed up time because there's nothing too eventful that happens in this. And this, with the landing of this craft, that will bring the end of this episode. A lot of contracts done, but sometimes you gotta do the work to make the money to then launch the fun things. And in the upcoming episodes, we're going to be doing more contracts, but a couple more interesting contracts, including sending 15 Kerbals up into space and having to figure out how to accommodate 15 Kerbals on one craft. So that should be pretty fun. We also have an episode, the next episode, where we deal with satellites that are quite frustrating. But that is for another time. With this, we have a successful mission. We went ahead and brought our pilot back home. We tested everything, we got all that money, and we finally cleared up some space for more contracts, because until we find min-miss, all we can really do is explore the MUN. So I didn't want to just have MUN mission after MUN mission after MUN mission just back to back. I want to spread it out a little bit. But with that, I will be leaving this episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please consider giving me a like, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.